We've been talking about what we do with the rest of the time that we have in the flesh, what Peter says there at the beginning of chapter 4. And we've said a couple of things pretty much every week. Number one, we said that the time that we have in the flesh is limited. We don't know how much time any of us has, but we know it's not unlimited. The time we have in this life is going to come to an end. And then the corollary to that is, if our time is limited, then what we do in this life matters in the next life. It has an impact on the next life. And so the takeaway from that is we need to be investing our time in eternal things, not just spending our time or wasting our time, but investing it in things that last forever. And last week, we've talked about several things, but last week we looked at investing in prayer. And then we began to look at investing in community. When I say community, I don't just mean community in general, but the community of believers that make up local churches, and how the relationships that we share with each other are corporate in nature. They're mutual in the sense that all the things that are commanded of us are meant to flow in every direction, that I love you, you love me, etc., whatever. But not only are they mutual, they're also interdependent. And by that I just meant that they have to flow in every direction in order for us to function in the way that God designed us to function, not just as a church, but as individual believers. That you can only be the person that God created you to be in the context of that community. And so today I want to start talking about why that's so important, because those things are true. It is mutual. There is an interdependence, but that's not an incredibly inspiring way to look at it, really. It expresses truth without inspiration. So what I want to talk about is something a little bit more, or why this is so important, based on the context of this book. Every letter has a context. Peter wrote this not just into a void, but into a specific time, a specific place, with a specific people in mind. And so as we've looked through this, we've said many, many times in this study that the main metaphor that Peter uses here is the metaphor of exile. That we're living here in this world, but we're not of this world. That we're living here, but our home is somewhere else. And I think we can understand that in an intellectual way just from hearing it. But in order for us to really feel the weight of that statement, I think you have to understand what it feels like to be outnumbered. You need to understand what it feels like to be the minority in a place, to be the stranger, to be the foreigner, to be the exile in a place where everything is different than your homeland, than the place that you come from, a place where the customs are not your customs. The language is not your language. If you've ever been overseas before and you've been in a place that did not speak English, I've talked about being in Japan before and how I couldn't believe they didn't all just speak English. They spoke Japanese. That was so crazy to me for whatever reason. But trying to communicate with people when you don't share the same language, even things as simple as the food being different. I have to pick on Randy Atkins now while he's down in Honduras and not here to defend himself. I remember when we went to Nicaragua years ago, one of our first trips, and Randy went with us and his family went with us, and we prepared the teams before we left. When we're here, when we're in Nicaragua, we're going to be eating rice and beans. That's the diet. It's the Dave Ramsey diet, Danielle. It's rice and beans and rice. That's what you eat pretty much every meal. I don't remember, maybe even breakfast, get some eggs, grits, and rice and beans. So just throw that in with all the meals. So we prep the team. That's what they eat, and so that's what we're going to eat when we're there. But if you know Randy, you know that Randy is a very picky eater. He would tell you that. I'm not telling something that he wouldn't also say, but he's a pretty picky eater. And so I'll never forget being in the airport, about to fly out, and we're sitting there together, and he opens up his bag, and his bag is packed slam filled with American snack foods that he was taking with him. He had like peanut butter and crackers and protein bars and all kinds of snacks from home. I have literally never in all of my life seen somebody pack that much food to take with them on a trip somewhere. It was incredible. But I get it because, Randy, I'll just say the most positive thing about it. He wanted to bring a taste of home with him. That's what he's going for. Want to bring a taste of home with him down to Nicaragua. And I know that's a light example. I think we can hear that and go, well, sure would be hard not to have the kind of food I like. I really like pizza, and I really like, grilled burgers, and I really like this or that or whatever the case might be. We can all see how that would be maybe a little bit tough, but it's a simple thing. What about the heavier things that when you find yourself surrounded by people, for instance, that do not share your religion? People that believe in a different God than you, people that have different morals than you do, different values than you do. And what if they not only had different religion, different morals and different values, but what if they were hostile towards you for your values and for your religion? What if they were antagonistic to you about your faith in Jesus? These are people that don't know God. They don't know Jesus. They mock your God. They alienate you from society because of your belief in God. And so they want to stay away from you. They want to push you to the sidelines. They want to make you an outcast in that culture. They want to tell their kids, imagine you're growing up and you have your kids and all the neighbors are saying, listen, don't play with those kids. Don't play with the Phillips kids. They may say that already. I don't know that, but I hope not. But imagine that if that were the case. They're like, don't play with their kids. Don't have them over for dinner. This is not new. This is all the things that we've been talking about throughout this letter. What if that was your everyday experience? Not just your 1 week trip. I'm on a trip. It's short term. You can do anything for a little bit. My dad always used to say that. You can do anything for just a little bit. But what if that is now where you live and you're surrounded by that all the time? How isolated do you think you would feel in a context like that? Don't you think you would get isolated? Don't you think you would feel alone? Don't you think, you're not from there, you live here, don't you think in that you would long for home? Would you not long for that taste of home, that familiarity of home? You would long for your people. Now imagine, as you live there, in that exile, isolated, away, outcast, imagine that you find out that there is a whole community of your people close by. Imagine you discover there's a community of exiles, a community of strangers, people from your homeland, and they're close. Don't you think you would go there? Would you not immediately go find those people? You would hunt them down immediately. And as you go, imagine you walk up and you've been in this foreign context. You've been this outcast, but as you walk closer to home, you begin to experience the smells of home. You notice you smell, somebody grilling burgers on a charcoal grill. As you walk up, you're like, that smells like my home. That's what I used to eat. And as you get a little bit closer, you start to hear the sounds of home. You begin to hear music playing. That's the music you grew up with. Your context, your culture, you're hearing them, and they're singing it, and they're joyful together. And you begin to hear them speaking in your language. You're like, wait a second, I understand what they're saying. I know it. I know the nuance of this language. This is my language. And as you get a little bit closer, you see them. And they look like your people. Like these look like the people from where I'm from. And as you walk up to them, they're smiling and they're warm and they see you and they recognize you. And they beckon you to come closer and they welcome you in and they invite you to be in the midst of them and they embrace you and they pull you into that community from home. And now, as you see them, now as you're a part of them, now you can understand. You speak the same language as them. Now you can pray and you can worship together because you have the same God that they do. And you begin to help and serve each other because you are the same people. And now even in the middle of that, even if society is aligned against you, that's okay because you found your people. Don't you think that would change the exile? What would that do to you? How grateful would you be for those people? Would you not cherish those people with everything that you have? These are my people. They're from where I'm from. Would you cherish them? Would you do everything that you could do? Would you move mountains? Would you move heaven so that you could be together with your people again? Like everywhere else I go, I'm isolated, but this is my people. Would they not be your safe haven? Would they not be your refuge? Would they not be your shelter? Would they not be like this fortress to you where you can come together? Would you not want to be with your people? And the whole point of that That is what we are supposed to be. That is who we are supposed to be. We are the community of exiles. We are the home away from home for one another. We're the people that speak that same spiritual language. We share the same spiritual heritage, the same food. We sing the same spiritual songs. We are meant to be that safe place. We're meant to be that refuge. And as I say that, I wonder, do you see it that way? I don't think we do. I don't just mean Gowensville. I mean the Western church in general. But you don't care about the Western church in general. But do you care about yours? Do you care about your own church? I do not think we see it that way. And it's not me accusing or antagonistic. I'm not sure I've seen it that way. I'm not sure I've looked at it that way. Look around you this morning. The people you see, the faces you see. Do we look like home to you? Do we look like refuge to you? Do we look like that safe place? When you look around you, do you look at the person next to you, not your literal blood family? Look at the person next to you and ask yourself, do I see my people in this? That's what we're meant to be. Or maybe you do, and I hope that you do, but if not, why? Why don't we see it that way? And some of it you could go, well, I don't see it in here. I've seen it in other churches. I don't really see it here. Well, that's an indictment maybe on us. But maybe it's not on us. Maybe part of it is on us. But maybe part of it is, have you just gotten used to rice and beans? Have you just gotten comfortable with the meals that you have there? Have you gotten used to the values, the morals, the religion, the customs of the world that's out there? I wonder if maybe that's gotten to be like home to you, more so than in here, more so than your people. Is that your home now? Because that's what happens. You know, this is true across all walks of life. The more comfortable you get with where you are, the more distant where you're from feels. That's just reality. The more comfortable you get with where you are, the more distant where you're from feels. And I wonder right now if you've forgotten where you're from. I wonder if it's grown distant to you. Have you forgotten? What do you think it would take for you to remember? What would it take for you to remember where you're from? What would it take for you to remember who your people are? Would it take disaster? Would it take your life falling apart and you got nowhere else to turn? Oftentimes that's what it takes. I don't know where else to go. I'm going to go back home again. We all know people that happen. They went off on their own. Disaster strikes. Life hits. You go back home. That's when you want to be back home again. Would it take that? Would it take your life falling apart? How about persecution? Would it take persecution, what we see in this letter? Is that what it takes for you to remember where I'm from? I don't pray for that. I don't long for that. It can take that. But what I would say to you this morning is it doesn't have to take that. It doesn't have to take disaster. It doesn't have to take your life falling apart. It doesn't have to take persecution. That's why we get together. That's one reason why we gather each week. Not just Easter, not just Christmas, week by week. We gather together as a people so that we can celebrate and remind each other where we're from, where our homeland is, so that we can tell stories from home, so that we can talk about the King that we worship. The King who's done good things for us and is going to do good things for us. And we encourage each other to look forward in hope to going back home again. And in that, we find strength. We find strength. We find strength to go live it out because we've encouraged each other to keep going and to keep fighting. And no matter how hard it gets, we don't ever give up. That is why we gather. That is one reason why we gather. Because when we leave here, and we're all going to scatter in 40 minutes or so. We're all going to scatter. We're going back out there. And when we go out as believers, we're going back again as exiles. We're going back out outnumbered. We're going into a world that is conceivably hostile towards us. But the beautiful thing about this, the beautiful thing about community, the beautiful thing about investing in community is when you invest in community, you take it with you. That we may go out and we might be outnumbered, but we don't go out alone. We go out together. We leave here together on Sunday, after church, on Wednesday, on whenever it is that we gather together. We go back out and we go together and we stand together. And that is a big reason why. You imagine that. That is a big reason why Peter keeps coming back to this over and over again. This young community, outnumbered, facing hostility. He keeps saying, be together, love each other, do these things, invest in one another. It's so critical, it's so important because it just gets snuffed out if you don't invest there. And so I want to look today at what it looks like to invest in community. 3 ways. We're going to look at 2 this morning. 3 ways to invest in community from this passage. Let me read the text first. If you have your Bible open, starting in verse 8, the Bible says, above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks as one who speaks oracles of God, whoever serves as one who serves by the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. So again, 3 ways that we invest in community. Number 1, we love earnestly. We love earnestly. This is not new. This comes from verse 8, but this is not new in 1 Peter. This is something he's said before. In fact, he's used this exact same phrasing pretty much back in chapter 1. So back in chapter 1, verse 22, Peter said, love one another earnestly from a pure heart. And right there in chapter 1, that was all about our identity. It's like, why do we love one another? We love one another because we've been born into this new family. That's why we do it. God is love. He's birthed us into this new family, and therefore we love one another. But right here, it's about maintaining that love. You got to maintain it. It requires maintenance. I noticed pretty recently that I had gone about my mom's in here, so she's going to be horrified, about 8,000 miles over on my oil change on my 22-year-old vehicle. You know, if it broke down, I deserve everything that happened to me because of that, right? But you got to maintain it. That's the easy stuff. That's the layups that you hit. Maintenance is to keep you from dealing with bigger problems in the future. You deal with them in a methodical way, in an intentional way, so that you don't have worse things to deal with later. Right? That's maintenance. Well, Peter's talking about maintaining the love. He said, keep on loving one another. That's maintenance right there. It's not start doing something you weren't doing. It's keep doing something that you were already doing. So he says, keep on doing it. Keep on, keep on, keep on. What does that mean? Keep on means don't get complacent with it. Has anybody gotten complacent with their maintenance? So don't get complacent with it. Because that's the danger. The danger that you face with familiarity is complacency. You know, you've heard people say familiarity breeds contempt. And I think that might be true to some degree. But before it gets to contempt, it starts with complacency. That we grow to take each other for granted. How many of you in here, you don't have to raise your hand, how many of you in here take God's people for granted? You take it for granted. Why? It's familiar. You're used to it. You're used to it. You take it for granted. It happens in so many different close relationships. It happens with friends. We take our friends for granted. We take our parents for granted. We take our children for granted. We take our spouses for granted. We take people for granted. And if you're not careful and if you're not intentional about it, it also happens with Christians. So you come into this place just like any new relationship. It starts exciting, And, I finally found my people. But after a while, you realize these people are kind of messed up just like I am. And they've got hang-ups and they've got problems. And, people are quite honestly difficult. And after a while, you just grow complacent. You grow to take it for granted. And you get complacent. And when you get complacent, what you're doing is you're no longer stoking the fire of love. That's what I mean by maintaining love. Maintaining love, I mean stoking the fire of it. And when you quit stoking the fire of love, then what happens is it goes from being a fire to an ember to out. That's how it works. It's fire to ember to out. And when the fire of love goes out, listen, it's not replaced with nothing. When love goes out, then the fire of hatred gets ignited. That might sound like an overreaction, but in the absence of love, hatred will take its place. And right here, we see what hatred leads to. What does hatred lead to? I think Peter's mind goes back to Proverbs. Very practical wisdom from the Lord. In Proverbs chapter 10, verse 12, it says, hatred, what happens when hatred replaces love? Hatred stirs up strife. All right? So that's what he said. What happens when hatred takes love's place? What happens when you let the fire of love go out in a body? What happens is hatred comes in and stirs up strife. So you get arguments, you get fights, you get divisions, and now the church that is meant to be the refuge for God's people then goes to ruins. You go from refuge to ruin. And what do we do then to keep that from happening? Well, second half of verse 12 from Proverbs chapter 10 says, but, so hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. And that's exactly what Peter is saying right here. Love covers offenses. Love keeps us from devolving into strife. Love keeps us from letting petty offenses grow into these huge arguments and divisions. Love is that thing that keeps a church a refuge. Love. And so if you notice what Peter said in verse 8, that's why he says, above all, keep loving one another. It's not that the other things aren't important. It's just that it starts with love. Love is the biggest. Love is the most important. It's what Paul called a more excellent way in 1 Corinthians 12:31. It's what Jesus tells us is the defining mark of a believer. The way the world knows us is by our love. So it's love. But you need to understand what kind of love this is. And I didn't intend to spend a whole bunch of time on this, but as I got into it, I started thinking about it. I think it's very important because there is so much cultural confusion about love that has even seeped into the church. People just don't understand what this kind of love actually is and what it means. And we have to have clarity on that, because if you define love the wrong way, then you're going to practice it the wrong way. And so we've talked already in this letter about brotherly love. That's not what this is here. What he says is agape. It's agape. And many of you have already heard this discussion before in your church history, what agape is and what it means. So if you already know this, I apologize. Just consider it a reminder, just to stir your mind up and help you think more about it. So the first thing I want you to know about agape is not a feeling or an emotion that you have. It is a choice that you make. It's not a feeling or emotion you have. It's a choice you make. I told y'all last week about the little marriage panel that we did with our student ministry on Valentine's Day, and it was such a fun time. But I got one question that really jumped out at me. Somebody asked the panelists up there, they said, how did you know that you loved each other? How did you know when you were dating, just asking about when we were dating, when Brooke and I were dating, when the other people were dating, how did you know that you loved each other? And the implication of the question was, how did you know when your like for each other crossed that line into love? And that's a very common question. It's a very common question. I would expect that kind of question. But it's also a fantastic illustration of the confusion that people have about love. Because the implication of that is that love is just an intensified version of like. Do you know anybody that thinks like that? You might think that way. That love is just a more intense version of like. And that over time, my like for you, I'm dating Brooke, man, we're having a great time. And at some point in time, my like crosses the line into love. And by the way, if you think that way, if you think that your like can cross the line into love, then you also have to think that your love can cross the line back over into like again. How many of you have ever heard somebody say, we just fell out of love? All right, they're expressing cultural confusion because it does not work that way. And so I want you to get this into your mind. Log it in, because I can promise you, you will be bombarded with this concept that love is this mysterious, majestic, special feeling that you have for someone. You're going to hear that as you go out of here. You'll hear it on the radio or whatever you listen to, the songs you listen to. You'll see it in the shows and the movies that you watch. You will see it in your conversations with people at school and at work and all these kinds of things. And I want you to log this in. Know it now. Never get confused again, okay? Can you remember this forever and ever and ever? Like doesn't turn into love. They are two completely different things. Like is not the same thing as love. They point in two opposite directions from each other. Like and love are completely different directions. When I tell you, Jed, I like you, that's not really about you, it's about me. That's what like is. Like is about me. It's me saying, there is something about you that I prefer. There's something about you that you do that makes me feel comfortable being with you. I like the way you do this. I like the way you acted there. It's all pointed at me. All right? It doesn't mean it's bad. It's similar to talking about attraction. When I talk about attraction, it's not really about you. If I say, I'm not attracted to you, that really doesn't have anything to do with you. It has to do with me, right? And that's like. Like, attraction, that is all pointed from me to you, or from you to me, right? It's about how I make you feel, liking being around you. But agape is completely different. Agape flows in the opposite direction of that. If I agape you, then it is all about you. It's not about me at all. I can love you in that way, even if I don't like you. I cannot like you at all. I think I like all of you, but I love you. But I love you. It's flowing towards you. It points at you. And so to answer the question I was asked that night, I was absolutely attracted to Brooke when we dated. I was highly attracted to her. I like being around her. I like spending time with her. I like talking to her. I like going places with her. I wanted to be with her. I liked her. We had all the chemistry. But you say, when did you know you loved her? Well, I knew I loved her when I started choosing to love her. That's when. It's not about a feeling I had. It's not an emotion I had, even though I had all those things. But I know I loved her when I started making the choice to love her. It was an act of my will, not my emotion, not my feelings. And that means that I cannot fall out of love with my wife. I cannot fall out of love with people that I actually agape. That cannot happen. Now, I can stop choosing it, but I can't fall out of it. That's not how it works. That's agape. That's agape. It's a choice I make that's not about me, but about the person that I love. And so if I love you, whether I like you or not, I am choosing your good over my own. That's built into this concept. What does agape look like? It is me choosing to act for your good, even over my own. It's choosing to sacrifice me for your good. It's me being patient towards you, even though I might not want to be. Every married couple can testify to that. I'm choosing to be patient with you, but I don't want to. I want to fly off the handle. I want to stir up strife right now. That's what I want to do. But I'm going to choose patience. I'm going to choose kindness towards you. I'm going to choose faithfulness. I'm not going to let what my feelings are telling me right now, well, I just don't feel like I love these people anymore. I just don't feel like I love this person anymore. I'm going to let my feeling guide me out of that relationship. Well, no, agape says, I don't care what my feelings are, I choose faithfulness. I'm going to continue to be faithful to you. I'm going to be steadfast. And right here It's me choosing to keep no record of wrongs. That's hard. That's hard. We talked a little bit about this last week. Some of you got some lists you need to tear up. But that's what this is. That's the covering here. It's me not holding on to those wrongs and those offenses. It's letting go of them before that strife comes into my heart and it gets ignited and then it spreads and then it burns not only my heart, but it burns up the fellowship around us. Because I think you know this, strife does not burn like a bonfire. All self-contained. Here's a neat little box. I build a fire here and it stays here. I stoke it here. It burns here. No, strife spreads like and burns like a wildfire. That's what happens with strife. How many of you have noticed that? Strife burns fast. It spreads fast. It burns far. And every time I stir it up, then it spreads even faster, because what I'm doing by stirring it up is I'm giving it more oxygen. And oxygen is what fuels a fire. But look at this. What happens to a fire when you take away its oxygen? It goes out, right? Take away the oxygen and the fire goes out. And it's the same thing with strife. When you give oxygen to strife, you are fueling it. It's going to burn hotter. It's going to spread faster. And y'all know exactly what that looks like. You have seen it. You have seen it in action. Strife gets in. Every time somebody gets to talk, well, that person over there, I don't like what they did. I don't like who they are. I don't like blah, blah, blah. You're talking like now. You're not talking love. I didn't like how they did that. I didn't like what they said. I didn't like what they blah, blah, blah. Talking about you. That's stirring strife up. It's fueling it. It's giving it oxygen. And now it's just spreading. You see how fast. It starts with one person. That person can't let go of the strife. I got to talk about it every time I'm around people. I hate this. I don't like this. I blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden it ignites a little spark in them. Then they're negative. And then they start spreading. And they start stirring. They start fueling it with oxygen. Then it starts to spread some more. Poof, it's just engulfed. But you cover it and it goes out. Here's my challenge to you. As you hear strife, and look, we love it. We love drama. You know it when you hear it, okay? Be honest. Be honest. Throw a blanket on it. Cover it up. Cover it up. Don't let it get past you. It might be here in somebody's heart. Don't let it get past them. You be the one that puts a stop to it. Smother it. Love smothers strife. Complacency will happen if you let it. It's not a question. It's not an uncertainty. If you let it, complacency will happen. And when complacency happens, then you will find strife. It will happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. But we do not have to let it happen. That's why Peter keeps coming back to it. Keep on loving. Keep on stoking the fires of love. Put the fire of strife out and stoke the fire of love. That's the first and the most important way we invest in community, but it's not the only way. Number 2, we show hospitality. Show hospitality. Verse 9 says, show hospitality to one another without grumbling. Now, I learned something new about that word hospitality this week. I didn't know before, but I learned that it was a combination of 2 Greek words. It's the combination of the word for brotherly love, which we've, again, talked about a number of times in this, but it's the combination of brotherly love and the word for foreigner or stranger or exile, right? It's the word xenon. Have you ever heard anybody talk about xenophobia, which is, I'm scared of foreigners, I'm scared of strangers or whatever. So it's a combo of those 2 words. It's a combination of brotherly love and foreigner or stranger. So it's essentially like a love for strangers. But basically what it means, a simple way to think about it is, it means that I make a guest feel like they're at home with me. That's just a simple way to think of hospitality. I make a guest feel like they're home with me. It's like a hotel. It's like a hotel. Hotels are part of the hospitality industry. I don't think I have ever in my entire life thought about why it's called the hospitality industry up until this week. But that's exactly the idea behind it. Hotels are a part of the hospitality industry. Have you ever been to a really good hotel? I'm not talking about, the roadside motel like the one Brooke and I stayed at on the way to the mountains years ago, where we thought, we thought maybe we were the welcome meal. Like we're just waiting for that person to creep in and eat us. That's what it felt like. So I'm not talking about that dirty, gritty roadside motel. I'm talking about a really nice hotel. When you say a really nice hotel, their mission is not just to make you feel at home, it's to make you feel better than home. Because I don't know about you, but when I pull up at home, I don't have somebody waiting to take my keys and park my car for me. I don't have anybody waiting, eager to get my bags out of my car and carry them into my room. I don't have anybody that walks me to the room and throws. Now, we have a wonderful, loving home, but nobody's throwing open the door talking about, here's your room, hope it meets your expectations and all that kind of stuff. If I try to do that at my house, I'd be like, well, you're part of it. You can, if it don't meet your expectations, then get in there and get to cleaning, whatever you got to do. But you go in, they take you to your room. You got a nice, I'm talking good hotels, you got a nice bathrobe, all soft and clean, hanging on the door, waiting on you to put on it. You got fresh towels, fresh sheets, fresh blankets in there. You got all the soaps and the lotions and everything that you need to make your stay feel good. You got coffee there waiting on you. All you got to do is just make it. It's all there for you. You don't clean your room. They come in and clean it for you. If you need anything, you got a concierge. You just call that concierge and be like, I need this, and they try to meet your every need. You got a pool to swim in. You got a spa to relax in. You got a gym that you can work out in. It's fantastic, fantastic. Now you pay for it. It's part of the cost, but it's worth it to be treated that way. It's worth it, and that's hospitality. And it's such a wonderful feeling to feel welcome somewhere, even if you do have to pay for it. Isn't that a good feeling? Isn't it a good feeling when you're treated not like a stranger, but like part of the family? Man, that's a great feeling. Because how many times have you been a guest somewhere and you were treated like a stranger? Have you ever been a guest treated like a stranger? And you show up and either people just stare at you. You ever walked in and people just stare at you? Who is that? They're different. They're new. They're a stranger. They stare at you like maybe there's something wrong. Did I forget to fix my hair this morning? Did I not put deodorant on this morning? Do I have some kind of disease? Do I look like I'm emitting germs as I walk around? What is it? People keep their distance from you. They stay away. They have this icky look about them. We've all looked at it. People cut their eyes. Or on the other hand, they just ignore you altogether. It's not like a negative response to you. It's just complete indifference. Nobody talks to you. Nobody looks at you. Everyone ignores you. You come in, you walk out, never have a conversation, never have a human connection with anybody. So it's this mixture of either they don't want you there, or they hope that you're about to leave really quickly. That's kind of the look there. But the point here in this is the point. This is the takeaway. A Christian should never meet a Christian stranger. That's it. A Christian should never meet a Christian stranger, because when you meet a Christian, even if you've never met them before, you don't know them, you don't know their background, you don't know their family, you don't know where they're from. Even if you don't have nothing, you know nothing about them except they belong to Christ. That's all you need to know. Because that person now you know something about them. You know that's a brother. You know that's a sister in Christ. You're meeting family. And so we want to make them feel like family. And that's what we want here. We want that at Gallonsville. I want that at Gallonsville. I don't know if everybody wants it. I hope you do. But that's what I want you to want. I think that's what the Lord wants us to want. That we should never want a guest to come into this place and feel like a stranger. Ever. And we want open doors. We want the warmth of home. We want the joy of home. We want, when you get among us, even if you don't know anybody in here, we want you to look at us and say, these are my people. This is my people. I don't know them, but I know where they're from. I don't know them, but I know who they belong to. We belong to the same place, the same person, the same people. And that is more. It's so much more than just a good welcome team with name tags on, standing at the door. That's good. It's crucial. It's important. We want to be intentional about that, to set an example through that team as you come in the door. But it's more than just being there, opening a door as a greeter team and smiling and giving you a bulletin and maybe helping you find a way. It's more than a team. It happens when every one of us in here, everyone who calls this place home, takes direct ownership over it. Over the hospitality of this church. It happens when you see it. I'm not a member of the greeter team. All right? You might not be a member of the greeter team, the welcome team, the whatever you want to call it team. But you take ownership of that. Like that, I'm not relying on them. I'm doing it myself. And I'm going to take a step out there. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to find out about them. I'm going to welcome them in. I'm going to make them feel like a part of the family. A guest ought to never feel like a stranger here. They ought to always feel like part of the family. And that's not just a Sunday thing. I'm not talking about just opening the doors of the church, but hospitality is opening your life up to someone. That's it at a deep level. It's welcoming people into our lives, making sure that they know that even when the world is closed off, we're not. We're open. And what a beautiful investment that is. That is a beautiful investment in community. But it's a big investment. It's easy to say, but it's not always easy to do. Not with the pace of our lives right now, not with how busy we are. Probably half the people in here are so busy they hardly have time for their own family. And so, it might be an inconvenience sometimes. It might mean I got to show up a little bit early to church on Sunday because I want to meet people. I want to welcome people. I want to make sure that people don't feel like a stranger. It may mean that I have to clean my house and cook dinner one night because I want to welcome someone into my home. It may mean that I need to take that call because somebody's hurting. I don't really know them that well, but they need something and they have a need that I can meet. And I need to open my life up to that person. That's love. That's hospitality. We may have to do some things when we're tired. And that's why we get tempted sometimes to gripe and complain, to grumble. It's too hard. I got too much to do. I don't have time for that. It's always, every time, I should have known, I shouldn't have come to church today. Because every time I go to church, he tells me something that I need to do that I'm not doing. I'm not trying to put a burden on you. I'm not trying to crush you. I'm just trying to teach. I'm trying to let the Lord work in your heart. I'm trying to let Him move in your life right now through the Word of God. Because that person that you're grumbling about, Peter said, show hospitality without grumbling. You need to know that person you're grumbling about, that is your brother and your sister. They're from your home. And what are they doing? They're here looking as exiles, looking for refuge, looking for safety, looking for belonging, looking for community. And if they've come here for it and they can't find it here, if they can't find it here, that's okay. But it better not be because we're not trying. It better not be because we're not open to it. Let us never be that. So my question to you this morning is, are you trying? But however you can, are you trying? Have you taken that on? Have you taken ownership in that? Is that your personal mission? I hope it is, because I want to remind you of something. Then I'm going to close. I want to remind you of something. You used to be a stranger to God. The Bible teaches that. Before Christ, I was a stranger to God. I was an alien to God. I was a foreigner to God. I was an outcast to God. I was an exile to God. I was an enemy to God. I was a stranger. I didn't know Him. I wasn't in His family. But what did God do? Even though I was a stranger, even though I was an enemy, God opened His life up to me. He sent His Son for me. Why? That He might take a stranger, an alien, an exile, and bring us into the family. And so now I'm not a stranger to God. Now you're not a stranger to God anymore. You're not an exile to God. You're not a foreigner to God. No, you're not even a guest. That's what's beautiful. You're not a guest with God. You are His child. He's brought you into what you didn't have before. And now you have a seat at His table. Now you have a home in His home. And He's preparing a banquet for us to all sit down together as a family and share that banquet one day. And so the question you have to answer is, if God did that for me, then should I not do that with others? That's the question. So I want to challenge you with two practical questions before we close. How can you make room in your life to show hospitality to someone, to show love to someone in this community? I say make room for a reason. It's jam-packed with stuff. Is there something you need to remove from your life that's keeping you from being able to do that to any degree? Is there something you need to shift out? Is there some way you need to invest your time differently? What do you need to do to make room for hospitality and love in this community? What's God saying to you this morning? What's keeping you from it? Maybe it's a priority. Maybe it's a commitment. And then the second question is, who do you need to practice this with? Think about that right now. Is there somebody in here? Is there somebody in here? They don't even have to be here today. God knows there's 150 people missing today. Think about them. Who is it in here that you need to practice this with? Who do you need to open your life up to? Who do you need to have into your home? Who do you need to warmly greet? Maybe it's just in here. Maybe right now, that's all you got. That's all I got. I can be here. I have no extra space. I'll work on it, but I'm not there yet. But you can do it here. You can welcome here. You can make guests feel like family here. You can love here. Father God, I pray this morning that you would take the clarity of your word and overcome the limitations of your messenger. God, I pray that you would speak with absolute clarity into our hearts right now. Reveal to us, God, what do we need to do? What do we need to make room with? And who do we need to make room for? God, give us a heart for our people, because our people are your people. And God, if we're more home in the world, if we're more at home in the country we're in now than the country we're from, oh God, would you help us? Would you change us? Move in us with conviction. And may that conviction become response. In Jesus' name.